Hey everybody, I'm Paul the Gamer Scot and welcome to my first look at Rogue Shift, a twin-stick shooter by Far-flung games. Before we start, I just want to remind you that I stream indie games like this right here on YouTube every week. So if you want to join me and the rest of the clan, hit that subscribe button like it's the last distress signal on the planet. So first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. Despite the name, Rogue Shift is not really a roguelike or roguelite in the usual sense of the words. Click the recommended video in the corner to see why I hate those terms and how we're getting genres wrong. But anyway, the levels are always the same layout and it's the same enemies coming from the same spawn points every time you play. It's really only the item drops and power-ups that are random each time, which isn't a bad thing, but if, like I did, you go in expecting the levels to be procedurally generated like The Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, you might be disappointed. But you shouldn't be. The game's actually alright. In fact, including the word rogue in the name, and the fact that the name itself is a bit forgettable, might be doing it a disservice. When you start, you need to create a character from a choice of 5 archetype classes: Engineer, Scion, Scout, Grunt and Guard. They have their own associated stats, but I can't really say I noticed that much of a difference between them. Every character has access to the same 5 special abilities: a teleport dash that you start with, a heal, an AoE stun, an AoE damage burst, and a run speed increase. There are also some modifications to each that you can unlock by leveling up, although it feels like not every upgrade has actually been added to the game yet. The only disappointment I have is that each class gets the same abilities. I'd have liked to see some unique abilities for each class, some AoE mind control for the Scion, some Team Fortress style engineer defenses, that kind of thing. There's a co-op mode, and it would be really cool if you could combine abilities to turn yourselves into an unstoppable killing force. I guess it's something that could be added or changed later in development, so your mileage may vary. Every alien monster you kill drops glowing orbs which you collect for experience. They're affected by physics though, so you need to make sure you collect them before they roll off cliffs or end up in lava or something. Bug or feature? I can't decide, but it definitely adds some extra pressure to the situation. When you level up, you get to upgrade some stats and choose a character perk from a random selection of 3. Some of these perks are more useful than others, and some can actively screw you over if used wrongly, so there's definitely a learning curve associated with them. And like any RDC game, they're only guaranteed to show up once. Levels that you gain are retained within that mode, so you can eventually brute force your way through the story if you keep dying and retrying. And for those of us who maybe don't have cat-like reflexes anymore, that's probably a good thing. One annoyance with the character class concept is that you can only have one at a time. So if you want to try out a different class, you need to lose all the progress you've built up for your old one. And after a few levels, that can be quite a lot to say goodbye to. I'd much prefer specific progress tied to each class, so you could jump in and out to see how they compare. So now we're getting to what I think is probably the most important question in any shooter. Do the weapons feel fun to use? Do you get nice audio-visual feedback when things blow up or die? Well, mainly yes, but also kinda no. The weapons all feel good to use and sound pretty solid. The default laser blaster is probably the weapon you'll use most, since it's the only one with unlimited ammo. And it sounds great. Shotguns bark, rockets kablam, machine guns rat-a-tat-tat, pretty much as you'd expect. It's not the most inspired of weapon selections, but there's enough of them, I think about 9, to keep things interesting and to appeal to most player types. There's also voice acting, although mainly just in cutscenes, but it's good quality. Everything has a really satisfying sound, except for the exploding barrels. There are 3 different types of exploding barrels, and they all sound a little bit flat and dead. This could be an artistic choice, given that sound doesn't travel in the vacuum of space, but I feel like they could use a bit more oomph. They do a ton of damage across a wide area, but the audio doesn't communicate that. You get used to it, but it's always a shock when they kind of go purp rather than boom. These are scientific terms, you would understand. Rogue Shift is split into 3 different modes. Story mode is the main one and probably serves mostly as a tutorial for your abilities and the kind of gameplay to expect. At the time of recording there are only 3 levels, and they only promise 3 on the Steam page, so don't expect any more. but each of the story chapters only takes about 30 minutes to complete once you know what you're doing, so don't expect hundreds of hours of play there. The mechanics follow some familiar beats though. You'll walk into an area, it'll lock off, you'll get swarmed by enemies, and then it opens up again when they're all dead. It's not super unique, but the breaks between those swarms feel right to keep the pacing going. You get a few minutes of calm exploration, and then a few minutes of frantic hordes. There's secret areas to find too, so it can be worth exploring outside of the fairly obvious linear path that the story follows. There are coloured doors that ask for keycards too, but either they're memeing on the Doom tradition, or they haven't been added yet. I'm not usually a fan of that kind of go here, get key, go back here gameplay if it's done too much, but having it as an option could be good for players who want to explore a bit. If it's actually real, instead of just a lol keycards thing. I genuinely hope that's a feature coming in the future though, because for me at least, I'd like to see some more options to improve the exploration side of things. The other gameplay modes are Doomed and Survival. Doomed is a standard wave-based arena mode where you fight against hordes of enemies until you're eventually overwhelmed. Survival is supposed to be a similar idea, but instead of staying in one place, you're progressing through a level. But, to be honest, I can't really tell the difference between the two. Even in the arena mode, you eventually move on to new areas, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe it's a mistake, or maybe one hasn't been properly enabled yet, but the game doesn't suggest that. The folly of early access, I guess. Each mode is scored, and there are high score tables, although they don't really tell you how you gain and lose points. I assume killing enemies and picking up the experience orbs gains points, but do you lose points for taking damage? Do you get more for finding secret areas? It'd be nice to have more of a specific list at the end so you could go back and have another go at it. Some of the scores are so far above mine that it's either people who have figured out a whole new way of playing, or it's cheaters. But I've no way of knowing. But the high score system and online co-op lead me to one big question I have about Rogue Shift, and that is, why is it always online? Your high score could and should be saved locally and uploaded at the end of the game, but Rogue Shift has a whole logging in thing that it does when it loads. Could it just be for the post-apocalyptic feel? Yeah, of course, but I don't think so. So what are they tracking here? Always online single player games worry me. It's time to talk about the in-game accessibility options. The only great news for accessibility is that all the controls in Rogue Shift can be fully rebound. The game supports mouse, keyboard or joypad, but either option can be remapped. That means any third-party controller should be good to go. For the visually impaired, there's an option to highlight enemies when you hit them, which is on by default, but there's no alternative colour schemes available for those with colour blindness. So is Rogue Shift worth picking up? It's hard to say. I enjoyed my time with it, but I really don't think it's ready yet. In its current state, it's probably a bit too limited. You'll get a few good hours out of it, especially if you've got a few friends to mess around with in co-op, but you will run out of things to do pretty quickly. And I don't like bringing up cost in these videos, but the entry price is pretty high for that kind of like throwaway purchase for a bit of weekend fun. But that said, if you're the kind of person who likes chasing high scores, then that might be enough for you. And if this video was enough for you, seamless link, please drop me a like because it really does help with the algorithm gods. And if you haven't already, please think about subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss new videos as they roll out. And follow me on Twitter. Once again, I stream games like this every week and I have new first look videos as often as my schedule allows. My name is Paul, I'm the gamer Scot, and I'll see you next time.